r/Askreddit. Former spoiled rotten kids, when did the real world really hit you? I grew up in Indonesia, a third world country where you'd definitely have maids if you're posting on Reddit. I grew up thinking it's common to have multiple maids. Moved to Singapore, a first world country where people still have maids, but it's more of an upper middle class and above thing. Got assigned to sweep the floors by the teachers, and that was my first time holding a broom. Swept it back and forth like in cartoons, and everyone was looking at me going, "ER, what the fuck are you doing?" Turns out I was just creating a dust cloud around me. You have to sweep in one direction and gather all the dust into the dustpan. Mind blown. Grew up in a fancy home, more rooms than you could ever need on a large property in a pretty rural area. I got everything I wanted whenever I wanted: huge plasma TV, DSLR camera, motorbike, pony, etc. I never knew what my parents really did for a living. I remember kids always asking what my parents did as a job in the playground, and I never really knew how to respond. I soon figured out what my parents did when my dad was arrested for drug trafficking and the house, cars, and everything else was repossessed by the government as profits of crime. I now live in a shitty house that barely stands in a dodgy area of town. It definitely was a shock to the system, but I'm adjusting just fine, I guess. I was a spoiled rotten child and also into my teen years. My parents bought me a brand new red convertible for my 16th birthday. I threw a fit over it because what I actually wanted was my brother's old car, that we still had, which was dark blue in color. I was so shallow and a horrible person back then. So what really turned me around? That next summer I took a job as a camp counselor at a local day camp. I did not have to work, but I was bored and sounded like something easy to do. God, I was so wrong. This day camp was specifically geared to the lower classes who could not afford childcare during the summer. We served them breakfast, lunch, and an afternoon snack. For a lot of the camp kids this was all they would eat that day, and on Fridays they would beg for extra food/snacks to take home for themselves and/or their siblings because they may not get to eat again until Monday. This really hit me hard, but the part that got me the most. This one kid, around 5 to 6, would refuse to take their shoes and socks off, even if we were going to the public pool that day. I couldn't understand why until one day he came in limping, like his feet were causing him so much pain. I convinced him to let me help him get his shoes and socks so I could see what might be bothering him. Once I did, it took everything in me not to break down right there. His socks were covered in blood. His poor tiny little feet were covered in sores and his toes seemed to curl under a bit. He was in so much pain from the state of his feet. As it turns out, he had been wearing shoes about 3 sizes too small. His family couldn't afford new shoes. I took my lunch break and went out to buy him new socks and a few pairs of shoes. This broke me, which I definitely needed. It changed my way of thinking forever. I was raised by my great-grandmother. She was well-to-do, active well into her 80s, and her world revolved around me. Ballet, gymnastics, all the music classes I could fit in my schedule. I had a menagerie of pets. Christmases were obscene. She catered to my every whim as a child. Now that I'm an adult and my wonderful gram has passed, I've learned that what I had was really unique. The world does not wait on me. I'm not special to everyone. I struggle with entitlement and narcissistic tendencies. It's isolating at times, and I miss her. I grew up in a Midwestern town, middle-class neighborhood, private school, etc. I never needed anything, but my dad grew up poor and my parents wouldn't give in to any of my big wants. Super Nintendo I never got, haha. My neighbor and best friend got everything he asked for. I loved hanging at his house because he had the best TV, the best food, the newest video games, 100 pairs of shoes and 1,000 hats. After we moved away, I found out that his parents gave him anything he wanted because they were in a loveless marriage and constantly fought around him. They were buying love when my parents were showing me love. I always wondered why he would prefer to stay at my house with a crappy TV and an outdated Nintendo with no games. Turns out he wanted to stay at our house because my parents didn't fight and would actually listen to him. My parents became surrogate parents for him, and to this day he calls them mom and dad. I'm happy to call him brother. If it weren't for him, I would never have known how I won the parental lottery. When I was 16, my parents left for a week vacation and gave me money for the week. Since I didn't know how to do laundry, never even seen it done, I took all my clothes to the dry cleaner. Even my panties. The cleaners asked 3 times if I was sure I wanted them dry cleaned. I said yes. 2 days later I got 8 pair of panties safety pinned to individual hangers. My laundry cost about $90 that week. I just assumed this was all normal. Not sure if this is a serious question, but here's a serious answer. When I moved out of my hometown for college, it was an absolute culture shock. I met other students who couldn't go to their dream schools because of how much it cost, so they had to go in-state. They didn't eat out every other day. They bought second-hand clothes. Some had never traveled out of the country, some never even out of the state. Some were driving their parents' first cars. That shit blew my mind. This is how the rest of the 99% of the country lives. I come from a filthy rich background, but I work hard to hide it so that you can't tell. I dress normally, I don't really talk about my background, I try to buy stuff on sale. Sometimes it shows in ways that I can't help. I'd never seen shitty cars before going to college. I don't know how to drive cars with poor handling, and I always forget to turn off the headlights because I've never driven a car without automatic lights. I don't know how much anything costs because it doesn't matter. I'll still buy it anyway. I also don't really value money. $100 just isn't a big deal to me, but I know it means a lot to others, so I don't mind giving it to friends who are in need. But if you don't look too closely at my habits, you can't tell. And that was a conscious decision that I've made. I'm grateful for never having to worry about money, and I likely never will. But I don't want to go back to my hometown because I think the lifestyle is unhealthy. There's so much entitlement, and the worst part is how rich people think that money defines your worth. I've seen them look at people with less money with such disdain, like their value as a person is less since they don't have as much money. It's disgusting. And I don't want to be associated with that kind of person. I also loathe the comments that come with it, like, if I were rich like you. I put an end to those immediately if they come up. I don't like being treated differently because of how much money I have, and I won't treat you differently for how much money you have. We are both people, and we are both worth something. I wasn't necessarily spoiled, but I definitely grew up in a very privileged family. Upper middle class, academic dad, and lawyer mom. I was 17 and I got a job as a porter at a hotel to save and travel for a bit before going to uni. My dad lives in Singapore, so I figured SE Asia. I went to Indonesia, Yogyakarta, to see Borobudur, and I was staying in a decent but not crazy fancy hotel near the temple. It was my first night and I had no idea if tipping was the normal thing and didn't have any rupiah on me, so I put a US $5 bill under my plate when I left. Working in a hotel you get foreign currency tips. The note was worth more as a novelty tbh. As the waitress cleared the plates and I was walking away, she freaked out, thinking I had left it there. She didn't speak a lot of English, but I got it across that it was a tip, and she basically broke down. It was fuck all money, so I was really confused. Made the mistake of Googling median wages of the area when I got back. Median, not even minimum, salary is about $3,000 a year. What I made in about 2 hours at a minimum wage hotel job, she made in a week busting ass for 80 hours. I tipped well all through my trip. Even bought the crappy knickknacks from the hawkers by the temple. It was fucking gutting. I realized that some people really struggle with money. I thought people didn't buy things they need, cars, appliances, clothes, a nice house, because they were really frugal and saving up. It's not even that I didn't know about poverty, but I thought it was a third world thing and that everyone in the US is pretty comfortable. This didn't sink in until college. I'm terrified for after college. I grew up with my mother doing everything for me. I was never taught many things because she would do everything. She's an amazing mother, don't get me wrong, but I wish I was taught more. Well, I have a job now where I take care of mentally disabled adults. You basically have to do everything. You have to do all of the cooking, all of the cleaning, all of the laundry, and you have to shower clients and change their clothes and diapers. Some of them can change themselves. I'd say that this job is helping me a lot. It's giving me more experience in the real world and a great opportunity to help my patients and spend time with them. I grew up living in a huge hotel. Kind of like your Sweet Life of Zack and Cody thing, except that I was a spoiled young kid. When I was 7, I'd have a nanny put on my socks, wear my school uniform every day, etc. I had 4 nannies before that and they all left. I made one cry once because I yelled at her for not helping me with my math homework. I slapped another one. She left 3 months later. It hit me hard a year or 2 later when my dad had to travel overseas to work, so I was stuck with that one particular nanny named Tina. My dad didn't really send a lot of money back to us, and so we had to live in a cramped apartment since we needed to move out of that particular hotel. I hated my nanny at the beginning because she was just so damn strict. Turns out that she was doing this because she wanted us to change, and we did. Because my dad didn't send enough money and didn't want to, stingy guy, we had to ration our food on some days, and I couldn't go to many school activities because we didn't have a car like we used to. And we didn't have enough money. This was hard on my brother and I because we went to a private international school, so it was really hard not trying to show others our personal struggle. It was even harder on me as I was a prefect at that school, and so not attending school activities/extracurricular stuff was the worst. During that period, I learned so much and begun to empathize properly. I learned to socialize with my neighbors, be independent, and this made me enjoy my childhood living in that apartment more than I ever did living in a hotel. I owe it all to my nanny, to be honest. I consider her my surrogate mom now, regardless of the rough beginning, and I, honest to God, would not have changed one single bit if it wasn't for her. When I was 30 and wanted a divorce, and it didn't happen magically by writing a check to a lawyer. I'm a teen living in one of the richest zip codes in the US. I have a college fund, a new car of my own, and have gone to private school my entire life. I'm terrified of being the spoiled rotten kid. As a child, I would be embarrassed when my dad came to pick me up from school in his Porsche. I knew the negative connotations of being the rich kid. I had seen Veruca Salt's demise. I have a couple very low-effort occasional jobs, i.e. babysitting, but the money ends up laying around. I've only worried about money once in my life, when I was at a summer class and ran out of cash and didn't know where the nearest ATM was. I have no budgeting skills. I don't spend a lot of money on things, but that's because I never have to pay for essentials. I have no clue how I'll know what to do when the cushion's gone. Dad took away my yacht. I realized life was hard. I've had an odd experience. I grew up in extreme wealth, then went to living very humbly. I'm half Saudi, so I had maids all my young life, practically wiped my arse. I remember whenever me and my bros got off the airplane and we were driven to the executive gold lounge, basically, we were minted. However, my parents got divorced and my mother decided rightly I should live with her back in the UK. So I went from maids in a mansion where my bedroom was bigger than most people's entire floor, in the UK at least, to sharing a tiny bedroom with my brothers. I remember my first time washing dishes at school, and I did it with cold water and the other students laughed and said you're supposed to do it with warm/hot water. I went from buying whatever I wanted to buying second-hand school clothes, but it was the best thing to happen to me ever because, holy shit, when I went back and met some of my old friends, their minds, they were just not normal people. This is when it really hit me, because I just saw how different they were. Fully grown men being catered for my maids in their old age. Do they have no shame? Rich coming from me, but hey, I mended my ways. Whenever I visit my father, I see my step-bro who continued being spoiled, 35-year-old man, never had a job, leeches off his mom. Our maid is like 60, she cleans his clothes, washes his dishes, might as well squeeze his arse cheeks whilst he takes a shit. I refuse to let the maid do anything, and I give where I can from money I earned. To see such a difference is what made me grateful and hit me. I am so fucking glad I didn't continue growing up spoiled. Frankly, I didn't grow up poor either. My perspective of poverty was warped compared to real poverty. Our tiny shared bedroom was luxury. I've learned never to take anything for granted. I'm so glad I grew up normally. I couldn't stand the person I'd become if I continued growing up spoiled. I work hard now. I support my mother. I have pride, something I'd never have if I continued being a leech. I grew up very privileged. When I look back on it, I never even appreciated it. When I was 17, I came out and went from privileged to getting kicked out and living on the street. That was some years ago now, and I've made a pretty amazing life for myself. In fact, I'm almost 100% positive that I'm better off than if I kept on my previous track. In every way.